Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my last lecture. If you hadn't heard by now, I've decided to retire, or I'm too young to retire, resign my position at JMU and try some new things moving forward. And so this may very well be the last time I ever deliver a lecture as a professor at a university. Who knows? I might join academia again sometime in the future, but for now, I'm going to try something else out. And so I want to take advantage of this opportunity to sort of share some thoughts with you. So first off, like, what is a last lecture? This is actually kind of a thing. It was started by this guy, Randy Pausch. He's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he actually had terminal cancer and died shortly after he delivered the lecture in this YouTube video. He also he wrote a book, or somebody made a book out of his last lecture. And after he did it, other people began to give last lectures, even if they weren't dying. And the idea being, if you only had, if you only had one more opportunity to tell people what you believed and what you thought they really needed to hear, what would it be? So first of all, I am not dying, not even close, at least, sure hope not. And also, I haven't had anywhere near as much time to prepare this as I would have liked. And so this may not be as polished as Dr. Pausch's lecture, although definitely encourage you to go watch that. It is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, if this was the last lecture I were ever to give, what would I want to say? What messages would I want to leave you with? And as much, when I boiled it all down, this is it. Grades suck. And you may be thinking, yeah, but I'm getting ready to graduate. Why should I worry about this? I'm going to tell you. I'm going to help you follow some of the path of how I got to this belief and came to this realization. When I graduated from college, I moved to Japan. My first job out of college was teaching English in a Japanese junior high school in rural Hokkaido. You can see me here with my sumo team at a local tournament. We actually, I don't know if we won first place or second place, but we did well. And that was a fun and memorable day. And you can see me here with some of my students, the junior high school students that I used to teach. Working in a Japanese public school, junior high school, was a really eye-opening experience. In Japanese public schools, grades are almost completely meaningless, which means you can do nothing, like maybe not even show up most of the time, and you will still be promoted to the next grade. So a sixth grader becomes a seventh grader, seventh grader becomes an eighth grader, regardless of how well you perform. And what this teaches the Japanese kids is that it is more important to remain a member of your cohort, of your tribe, than it is to actually learn or accomplish anything as an individual. And every aspect of Japanese daily life is organized around groups and teamwork. And they learn from a very, very early age. And we're talking, kindergarten, first grade. They learn that you seldom get to choose who is on your team or who's in your group, and that some people are better at some things, other people are better at other things. Some people don't ever contribute much of anything ever, and that's just a fact of life. And they adjust for it, and they develop an attitude towards teamwork, which is very calm, and they all just will always pitch in. And it's pretty amazing. You can grab any random group of Japanese people and give them a task, and almost without talking about it, they can self-organize and get to a productive flow in a very, very short period of time. This is opposed to the United States, where the emphasis is on developing yourself as an individual, right? And if you don't pass all of your classes, you don't get to go to the next grade. You don't get to graduate from whatever school you're in. There's a lot of pressure and stress placed on you to perform and to prove that you personally have learned something or accomplished something throughout the course of your life. Now, these are two ends of a spectrum, and they both have their problems, right? Japanese people definitely could do with a little bit more focus on themselves to develop themselves better, and people in the US could probably deal with a little bit more focus on being a good member of a team, member of a group. But broadly speaking, this is sort of how these two cultures are organized. In the United States, we are taught to believe that grades are everything and are a decent measure of your worth and value. Think about how important your GPA has been to you at different points in your life. My mother was a high school guidance counselor, and she was totally focused on me getting into college, and just hammered into me the importance of grades from a very early age. And I remember my junior year in high school, every day I would come home from school, I would sit down and start studying. I would continue studying till like midnight. I still wouldn't be done with all the work that I had to do. I was exhausted, and then I would just start it all over again the next day. And by the time I got to college, I was totally burned out. I just didn't have any more love left for grades. I did well. I did extremely well in high school. I got scholarships to college and things like that. But I really was left with a lot of questions like, why did I live my life this way for these few years? Fast forward to me becoming a professor, and one of the questions that has haunted me my entire career as a professor is, what is so important that everyone needs to know it? And this is a question that professors have to ask themselves every time they put together a syllabus. So, I'm getting ready to teach an introductory programming class. What skills are so important that everybody who takes this class absolutely cannot leave this class without knowing it, right? Is it object-oriented programming? Is it loops or if-then statements? And for the problem I have with this is that for every answer I try to give to that, I can give a perfectly valid counterexample. Well, I can see a person being a successful programmer who doesn't know how to do object-oriented programming. I can, and when you really boil programming down to its most important elements, what is a variable? What's an if-then statement? How do you do a loop? Those skills tend to be just so incredibly easy that you can cover them in the first 2 weeks of the course, and then what? Then how do you spend the rest of the semester? And it gets more difficult for other courses, right? Whenever I would ask the question, right? Because think about what's going to happen. When I set some arbitrary set of learning objectives in a course, some people will jump through the hoops that I set up for them with flying colors. Some people won't. And that means they'll end up getting a bad grade, and they'll feel bad about that. And they will feel bad about me. And why do we need to set this up? That's not fun for them. It's not fun for me. Who benefits from this? What does anyone get out of this? And so, every semester when it came time to put a syllabus together, I just struggled mightily with this. And, I went through every phase of putting together 15, 20-page syllabi that, mapped out the whole semester down to the minute, to this semester with you guys, you didn't get a syllabus at all. And there was a whole evolution that went along with that. We treat grades as more important than your health, right? Think about how often you have, skipped exercising or skipped a meal or just eaten unhealthy food because you got to cram for that exam. You gotta get that project done. It's more important, we think, than self-esteem, right? We'd rather someone come in with a C, D, or F in a class than come away from it feeling good about themselves for what they were able to accomplish, right? We are going to emphasize their failures. Financial well-being, right? We, have a focus in this country right now on student loan debt. And, this semester, I have a student who is skipping classes to work to pay for their education, which they're not getting because they're skipping classes to work to pay for the education. It's maddening and just completely asinine. And all of this is in service of got to get the grade. You gotta set yourself up for success. And it's also more important than relationships. And I'm not going to give you an example here, but I will talk about some later on. Grades destroy all of these things, right? They can destroy your health, your financial well-being, your self-esteem, and your relationships, and more importantly, your love for learning, which is the thing that more than anything else I want to come through when I teach a class, is just how interesting I find the stuff and how much I want to share it with the people that I am interacting with. So the question I asked myself over and over again was, why? Why do we do it this way? Why do we have to have grades? What purpose do they serve, right? And the answer I came up with is, it's because we always have, and everyone assumes it must be this way. Now, this is not entirely true. I actually dug into the history of grades, and in the United States anyway, at the very beginning, right, when Harvard was the first university, was opened, I think 1636, 1637, somewhere around then, they didn't have grades at the beginning. Eventually, they added grades because at graduation, there were these special speeches, and it was an honor to be picked to give these speeches. And it turns out that the people who are getting picked to give the speeches were not actually the best students. They were the children of the richest parents, right? The ones who would donate the most money to the university, even back in the 17th century. And so they came up with a grade-like system to differentiate people who worked hard versus ones who didn't, so that they could come up with a valid justification for not having the richest parents' kids be the one to get the honors at graduation. And that's how it started. And it gradually morphed through a whole bunch of different iterations to the point that now, in the 21st century, nobody can remember a time when we didn't give grades and can't envision doing it any other way. And if they're like me, right, I just assumed that, well, everybody does it this way. It's been done this way my whole life. All of my teachers do it this way. I know for a fact that many of them care about me as a person and wouldn't want to hurt me or punish me or put me through an unpleasant experience. So there must be a good reason why we use grades, right? Turns out the answer is absolutely not. There is not really a good reason, and there's just rafts of research to support this conclusion, none of which I'm going to have a chance to go into today. But if you're curious, hit me up, and I'd be happy to share some of it with you. And this is just so sad and unfortunate. We've never asked this question, where did it come from and why do we do it this way? Because if we had, we might do things radically differently. And part of the reason I'm leaving academia has been my failure to convince my colleagues and other people that there is a better way to do things and we should all be following it. So some of the frequent justifications you hear people give for grading are measurement, feedback, and motivation, right? Why? So we can measure learning, so we can provide feedback on how people are doing, and so we can motivate them to work harder. So I've dug into these questions, and again, I told you there's research behind all of this. And when you're looking at the question of measurements, grades mask your history, right? If you see someone's grade for the semester, like maybe they got a B+, that would mask the trajectory which they followed to get there. So you might, if you looked at their GPA, I mean, if you looked at their individual grades over the course of the semester on assignments and things, it might be like, you know, F, D, C+, D, B, B+, A, right? And you could see a trajectory of them starting out really poorly, and then they worked really hard, or, you know, something happened and they began doing a lot better. And so that B+ is a real triumph because they turned things around. Alternatively, it could tell the opposite story, right? Maybe they started with all A's, and then over the course of the semester, they started slipping, they started putting in less effort, or they began hitting a point where they had difficulty. And so that B+ represents, sort of a trajectory, a downward trajectory. But you can't tell that from just looking at the grade, right? The same way that if you look at somebody's college GPA, you have no idea, absolutely no idea what it took for them to get to that point. And that's problematic when you're trying to evaluate people and get to know people and decide whether or not you want to hire them or be on a team with them or whatever. A second thing that grades do in terms of measurement is they obfuscate variation, right? If you have a student who's getting AF versus B, and their GPA is the same, those tell very, very different stories, right? And the whole sense of variation is completely lost by this measurement. And that's sort of the opposite of what measurement is supposed to do, right? Measurement is supposed to give you more information, not take away information. And this is the third one, grades abusing statistics. Probably the most devastating argument, also the most boring and the most tricky to understand. But in a nutshell, it is a violation of the statistical rules of the arithmetic mean to calculate a grade. Yes, you can calculate, a number grade at the end of the semester for all of the different things. But those grades are actually ordinal measures, and the resulting average is, from a statistical perspective, has no reliably meaningful interpretation, right? In other words, yes, you can calculate it, but it's impossible for anyone to know what it means, right? It's impossible for us to know. Let's say you get a B+ on a paper. We don't know, are you an A student who slacked off? Are you a D student who busted your butt? Are you an A student whose dog died the night before the test, or who got, you broke up with your significant other, or maybe the teacher was half asleep while they were grading it, or, there's just so many different explanations for a person's performance that just are not captured by the grade, and therefore they just are terrible at measuring anything, learning, effort, or otherwise. Are they good feedback? Turns out research says no, they're not. They don't, if you get a test back and it's got a grade on it, you look at the grade and you're like, okay, I got a B, or I got a C, or I got an A, or whatever. That doesn't show you necessarily, and maybe even if some of the questions have a check or an X, it doesn't really necessarily show you where your understanding didn't measure up. It doesn't help you pinpoint exactly what the thing is that you got wrong. And you might say, yeah, but my teacher writes comments on my paper to explain those things. The research would indicate that if you put a letter grade next to a comment, most students will just look at the letter grade, flip the paper over, and never actually go back and read the comment or set up time with the professor to come back in and have in office hours or any other time to get more personalized guidance on it. Most professors don't explain or justify why or how they've come up with a particular grade or grading system for that matter. Like, why is the test, why is a test worth 3 quizzes? Or why is the semester project worth 50% of your grade? Why not 45? Why not 80? Right? The answer is that they basically just, by guess and by golly, they pull it out of thin air and they make it up as they go along. And grades don't provide guidance, right? You need, good feedback. We know this from just reams and reams of pedagogical research. In order to provide good feedback, people need to know exactly what they did wrong. They need to know exactly why it's not the best solution to the problem they were trying to solve. And then they need to be pointed in the right direction. They need to be given some actionable feedback, something that they can do to improve. And grades don't provide any of those things. At best, they give you, a sense of, yes, it was right or wrong, but they don't explain and they don't provide guidance. And people do better if you provide the guidance and leave off the grade altogether. And then the third question, right? We're talking about measurement, feedback, and motivation. The third question is, do grades motivate you? And the answer to this question is unequivocally yes, absolutely they do. The problem is not a question of if they motivate you, but how they motivate you. And I'm summarizing a lot here, but grades destroy your intrinsic motivation. And let me explain that word a minute. Broadly speaking, there's 2 kinds of motivation. There's intrinsic motivation and there's extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is doing something just for the joy of it, right? Maybe you like running, and so you run, right? You don't have to have a reason why. You just love running. Me personally, I like solving puzzles, right? So you don't have to pay me. It doesn't have to be a job. You don't have to offer me a reward or anything. I will do the Wordle every day just because I enjoy it, right? Intrinsic motivation is doing something just for the joy of doing it. Extrinsic motivation is doing something because of either to get a reward or to avoid a punishment. And it's not necessarily an either or. You can have activities for which intrinsic or extrinsic motivation could be good. For example, let's take oral hygiene, right? Brushing your teeth. I know some people just love brushing their teeth. They get intrinsic pleasure from it, right? They would do it without any external rewards or punishments. That's not me, right? I don't mind brushing my teeth, but it's like I don't do it because I love brushing my teeth. I do it so that I don't get cavities and that I don't have to, pay a lot of money to the dentist. I'm doing it to avoid punishment. And grades punish you, right? You'll hear professors say, well, a C is not a bad grade. Like hell it isn't, right? Like the real experience of people in our academic system, they know, right? If you go to grad school, a C is basically a failure. And that sort of mentality has come through. So anything less than an A is perceived by students as punishment, right? And they don't see it as necessarily a result of, they don't see it as a measurement of their learning. They don't see it as feedback. They don't see it as anything other than a mechanism to manipulate them. Grades rupture relationships. And I think I've got some pictures here of me with students. And these are, I have many, many, many more pictures of me with some of my students. there are plenty of my colleagues who would tell you it's not okay to be friends with students. Professors and students should not be friends. That's not an appropriate relationship. And I have to disagree. Some of the most fulfilling friendships and relationships I've had in my adult life have been with some of my students. And it is specifically by building those bonds of trust and friendship that I'm able to deliver the harder to hear feedback, right? Because as organisms, as living things, we're always seeking to protect ourselves. We're seeking to protect ourselves from physical threats, cold, bee stings, whatever, right? We protect ourselves from physical pain. We also protect ourselves from emotional pain. And one of the ways that you can protect yourself is if you get a bad grade and you sense that it's going to make you feel bad about yourself, and that's painful, right? Having a lowered self-esteem is painful. One of the things you do is you just reject it, right? You come up with other reasons, like that professor doesn't like me. You come up with all kinds of reasons why you shouldn't have to listen to that. And the minute that trust relationship between the student and the instructor is broken, right? The minute you don't believe me or you're not willing to hear the feedback that I have to give, the effectiveness of the relationship is just damaged, right? It is, it's difficult for us to get the benefit of the relationship that we otherwise might get because of this whole sensitivity around grades. Grades ignore reasons, right? And so, you hear professors talk about objective grading, and there's nothing objective about a learning experience, right? I mean, just in the last few semesters, right? I have students who have gotten COVID, right? I have students who have found themselves in dangerous situations. I have students who have learning disabilities. I have students who have financial or family issues. And an objective grading scheme doesn't take any of that stuff into account. One of the things that just annoys me the most is doctor's notes, right? A doctor's note is a product of our educational system. And the overwhelming message that we're sending to students is, we don't trust you, right? Why can't you just come to me and tell me, I was playing basketball and I got hit in the head and I have a concussion? If you tell me that, I was like, oh crap, that sucks. Is there anything I can do to help you out? Are you okay? Yeah, of course we can delay your assignment, but typical grading schemes are set up specifically to remove the obligation of the professor to care. And even if they are a caring person and they're a compassionate, empathetic person, that mentality tends to creep in. And I've seen it in myself. Especially the early days of my teaching, I used to come up with these super detailed attendance policies that, like if you had a reason, if you were there, you got 2 points. If you were absent, you got 0 points. If you were absent, but you had a good reason, you could get 1 point. And the reason that you didn't get full points for having excused absence was it still cost somebody something. Like I just came up with all these justifications. And all of it was really just a shorthand so that I didn't have to learn about what's going on with you. And that's a problem. Grades discourage risk taking, right? Think about the situation where there's some topic that you're really interested in studying, but it's really hard and you don't know if you're going to do well. And you got a good GPA, you got a 3.8 GPA, and you're a senior and you have some elective credits left. And there's this course in another department that you have an opportunity to take, but if you do poorly on it, it's going to bring your GPA down. It would be a risk for you to take this course which otherwise is just going to, enrich you as a person, make you more well-rounded. It's going to bring more joy to your life. But you may not take that advantage. You will avoid taking risks. You'll take the safe path because of the grade. And there's other factors there, but I think you get the point. And then finally, grades kill joy. They destroy your intrinsic motivation. And there's a great story about this. So there's this guy who, every day walks home from work, and on the way home, he passes this corner where there's a bunch of neighborhood kids who like to hang out. And they're kind of bullies. And at one point, they just start teasing him and harassing him and throwing things at him. And it really is just upsetting to him, distressing. And so he comes up with an idea. And so the next time it happens, he pulls out a bunch of dollar bills and he gives one to each of the kids. Says, man, you guys are so good at, dishing out the insults. Yeah, keep it coming, right? And then the next day he comes by and they do it again, right? They're like, oh, cool. And so he's like, I don't have as much money today. Here's 50 cents for each of you. And then the next day he's like, oh, here's a quarter. And then, the next day he comes and, they start dishing out the insults and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't pay you. And they're like, well, screw that then. We're not gonna insult you anymore. And what this story illustrates is that people become dependent upon the reward as the reason for doing the thing, right? These kids came to see the money as the reason for insulting this guy. And when he stopped paying them, they stopped insulting him, which is exactly what he wanted in the first place. Clever use of reverse psychology, but think about this. We all love games, right? How many people like trivia night, right? You go to a bar, you sit around with your friends, they ask you a bunch of random hard questions. You get some of them right, you get some of them wrong. It's fun, right? It's a great way to socialize and learn something new. And, you tell your roommate when you got home, hey, guess what I learned at trivia night? Did you know that, whatever, right? Put that next to the question, who likes tests? What's the difference between a test and trivia night, right? You asked, except for the test, you actually kind of have a sense ahead of time what the questions are going to be. Like if I told you had to take a test in a class for a grade where there's going to be a bunch of random hard questions that you couldn't predict what they were going to be, there would be a riot. There would be a big protest. But go to trivia night where you get asked a bunch of random hard questions. Yeah, sign me up. And these are illustrations of the ways that over time, we basically drain the joy out of education. If you go into like a first grade class and you walk in and you say, who wants to learn thermodynamics? All the hands will shoot up and they'll be like, me. Like, do you know what thermodynamics is? No, they don't know what that is. But, if you're excited about it, they're excited about it. They're just so eager to learn new things. And from between, kindergarten, first grade, and the time you graduate college, we just systematically undermine all of that joy that you may get from learning. Now, fortunately, many of us survive into adulthood with our love of learning intact, not entirely undamaged, but definitely intact. And I hope that most of you will get there. That the way that we've run this class this semester has been part of that effort to get you in love with the things that you do and the things that you've been studying for all this time, right? So yeah, grades don't do good for measurement. Grades don't help with feedback, and they certainly are terrible for motivation. So what, right? You're like, I'm getting ready to graduate. I don't have to worry about grades ever again, right? Unfortunately, because you spend the first 22 years of your life, in a culture that is just top to bottom run with rewards and punishments and grades, that is how many of us, most of us, structure the rest of our lives. When you get into your job, when you get into your friendships, when you get into clubs and outside organizations, when you have kids, this idea that the way to motivate people is to give them a prize or give them more pay or a bonus, right? And there are some people for whom monetary or other rewards are good motivation. That would be salespeople. Salespeople are a special category of human being. But for most of us, they've done all these surveys where they ask managers, they ask bosses, they say, what motivates your employees to come to work? And the number one answer they give is, well, obviously their paycheck. And then you ask the employees, what motivates you to come to work? Why are you here? And they talk about the work. They talk about the good that they're able to do and the problems they're able to solve and the contributions they're able to make to society. And yeah, of course they need a paycheck, but that's not the reason people show up for work. And yet, all their performance reviews and their annual evaluations, and when they come up for promotion, it's all couched in this, if you do X, we will give you Y. And that is the formula for rewards and punishments. So yeah, how you evaluate at work, how you judge your colleagues, right? And how you interact with your kids. All of these things are going to be a part of your life for the rest of your life. And I think it's important to think about these things as you move forward. So what's the theme of my last lecture? There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all education. No such thing as a one-size-fits-all performance review. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all parenting style. As much as possible, what I hope you've learned from me is compassion. As you interact with your employees, your families, your friends, your children, I've come to find that the best approach is to remember that everybody's making the best decision that they know how to make in the moment, right? There are very, very few truly evil people who are out to hurt people. If you spend enough time getting to know someone, like when people let you down, when they violate your expectations, when they do things that upset or hurt you, most of the time, that wasn't their goal. Now, they might have had a competing need that overrode their ability or desire to be compassionate towards you, but most of the time it's not aimed specifically at you. Everyone, all of us, you, me, have busy, complex lives, and we're all worthy of respect and compassion. And if you come at every interaction from that perspective, and it's hard, you have to train yourself not to think badly about people. One of the things I discovered about myself when I was a younger teacher was that, if a student was absent from class, my immediate assumption was something was nefarious. They were sleeping in, they were cutting class, they were being a lazy bum, whatever, right? My partner even said, well, why would they do that to me? Why would they not show up for my classes? And she took it very personally, right? When she taught. And over time, I came to see it has nothing to do with me, right? And they want to show up for class, that's fine. Or if they're not showing up for class, maybe it's because it's not, maybe there are competing priorities that are a better use of their time, right? Maybe they really do need to work that part-time job, or maybe they do need to take care of their family member, or, maybe they needed a day to sleep in, right? All of these things are perfectly reasonable, plausible reasons for doing something that hurt my feelings and let me down as the instructor. And over time, I had to train myself not to have my knee-jerk reaction be they're a bad person, right? So when people fail to live up to your expectations, pay attention to the way it makes you feel and reject that initial impulse to cast aspersions, to think badly of the person when they didn't, show up for the meeting or complete their part of the project or whatever it is that you expected them to do. Because we all have busy, complex lives, and we are making the best decisions we know how to make in the moment. And ultimately, like if you think about the content of the work, right? If I think about, programming assignments, ultimately, how important are they? Like in the grand scheme of things, how important is if you turn in your programming assignment today, on the due date, or tomorrow, or next week, or ever for that matter, right? Is this going to materially impact my life? No. Your life? Probably not, right? Does that mean you'll never learn how to program? No. Does it mean that you don't already know how to program? No. It means that for whatever reason, it didn't work out that you were able to do that programming assignment and turn it in on the due date that I set, that I arbitrarily set for it, right? So what's more important and what can last and what can have significance is those relationships that you have with people, with your colleagues, with your, people who report to you, the people that you report to in your professional lives, your family members, friends. All of those relationships are the things that will make the difference in the grand scheme of things. And, it's really important to train yourself to focus on that and not on the day-to-day things. Now, that's not to say that you should completely brush problems aside. There are, relationships involve work. And if two people are consistently failing to live up to each other's expectations and, making each other upset and hurting each other, then there probably needs to be some sort of intervention to fix that situation. But on the day-to-day, right, try to make sure that you're not setting up the relationship to fail because of this focus on, rewards and punishments. Yeah, just strive to meet everybody where they're at. You are where you are. Everybody in this class came in with a different life history, a different trajectory, and my goal is to meet you where you are and help you get in the direction that you want to go to. So treat people as people. Don't try to shoehorn people into an ideal system to control them or to fit them into your worldview, and try to, do your best to prevent others from treating you the same way. Also, hopefully with compassion, because if they are treating you that way, it's probably because they haven't ever thought about it deeply and they don't know any other better way. So thank you all so much for a great semester. It's been a privilege to get to spend this semester and some of our previous semesters together. I hope you will stay in touch and will let me know how things are going for you from time to time. Hey, if you got a particularly interesting project going on, let me know about it.
Thank you, Morgan.
And we have a few minutes left if anybody has any comments or questions.
I just thought the part talking about how the grades sort of changing was really interesting. Like if one student got an A on one assignment, but then an F on the next, but then a different student might get a C plus and then a B, their grade might be the same, but theoretically the person who has a C plus than the B knows more overall than the person who got an A and then failed. So I just thought that was really interesting. I've noticed that too throughout all my years of schooling, and just like that point.
And I'm sure almost all of you have had the experience of taking classes where you basically did next to no work and got an A, and another class where you busted your ass and got a C. The amount of effort you put in doesn't necessarily correspond to the outcome. And even like if you've got two professors teaching the same class, you might have to bust your ass for this one and get a worse grade and not have to work as hard for this one. And that may not even relate at all to the amount that you learn, right? So learning doesn't have to be unpleasant. And you don't have to beat students over the head with grades to make them excited about the content.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because the class I've put the most work into ever was Calc 2, and I barely got a 70 in the class. Like on the last day, I somehow got a 70, but I've never put more work into a class than that class.
And the important question to me then is, do you still do calculus? Do you enjoy it?
No, most certainly not. I do not enjoy calculus.
And so what's the point, right? Like, if you get to the end of your college career and you think, thank God I never have to take another class ever, then we as educators have utterly failed. We have utterly failed, right? We have failed to imbue you with a love of learning and curiosity and a sense of your own power to go out and learn the things that you're interested in learning. And that's just sad. That's just sad.
Yeah, I took the Calc 2 to fill the CS requirement at the community college, and just knew I had to get a C in it just to get past it, and then I would never have to take another calculus class ever again. And
so
I made it, and I was so happy that I never was going to have to do that.
Who can tell me this is a great example. Who can tell me what the purpose of calculus is?
I have no idea. Kills my GPA. I know that.
Why would we make
for,
you study it? What is calculus the mathematics of?
Sort of, in one sense, for Calc 2, I knew that it was important once it got to the series and sort of that repetition, because in computer science, and I'm sure many of you have had to deal with it, sort of recursion and sort of series tie together in a sense of patterns, and the more you go in depth with something, the closer and more precise you can get to an answer. Like, I know for the number pi specifically, you could also relate it to that, but like in a general sense, I'm never really ever going to use it. But other than that,
and this is where we fail, right? Calculus is the mathematics of change. It's how we are able to mathematically describe how processes happen in the world, right? How things grow old, how they decay, how they build up, how they, how populations grow and decline. And if you want to be able to model those things in software, it's helpful to understand the mathematical language for doing that and convert that into code. But we don't ever convey it that way. We don't talk about using calculus to model the behavior of the people in the social network that you built, or the e-commerce system that you built over time. We don't treat it as a way to, analyze and decide on the next best thing you should do. We treat it as this like separate, abstract, painful thing, and it's never connected to what matters. And if you think about people like Isaac Newton and Leibniz, who are the people who invented calculus, right? They're sitting there staring at the world and thinking, I want to see inside the mind of God, right? I want to understand how the universe is constructed, and damn it, I'm going to come up with a way to describe it. And they came up with this mathematical technique, which, has since been used as punishment for the rest of us for evermore. And why, right? They saw something, they were passionate about it. They saw something interesting and fundamental about it. And lots of other people have too. Why don't we get that?
yeah,
all right, guys.
I definitely agree with that.
Thank you so much. I know most of you are graduating, so congratulations. I hope you take some much needed time off, and like I said, explore the world and keep in touch. You have my Gmail, and I will definitely still be paying attention to it. Have a great day.
Thank you, Dr.
Morgan.
Benton.
How's it going?
Thank you, Morgan.